Out of all your awards and accomplishments, though, which is the one that's most special to you? We'll go down there.
When we win, that's it.
Is it that plain and simple for you, though?
Yeah, I mean, that's why you play.
Is it winning or misery for you?
Yeah.
What's misery like for you?
It's tough. You play to win. In anything. If you want to race me down the street, I'm going to beat you. Because it's black and white for me. I don't think you're happy finishing second or happy getting to a World Series. The goal is to win. If I don't win, then not fun to be around.
So what's worse, 2007 or 2001, 2003? You get to the World Series, but you lose, or not even making it to the World Series?
I mean, how do you rate losing?
It's all misery to you.
Yeah, I've never understood it. It feels better because we made it to the World Series and lost. Why does it feel better? I've never understood that. I really don't get that one.
Well, there is something, you've accomplished something by at least getting to the World Series.
What did you accomplish? You lost.
But there was some winning to get there. Yeah. I get it.
Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question widely held takes on today's sports. I'm Matt, and this is Blake.
Hello.
And today we're going to continue our discussion on one of the most highly contested sports topics today, and that is tanking. We covered kind of conceptually what tanking is and kind of why people might look down on it in our previous episode. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, I'd highly recommend going back and pulling up that one and taking a listen to it. We certainly appreciate everybody that does listen to our episodes. Today, instead of the more conceptual stuff, we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. Does this actually work? Cases where it did, cases where it didn't, and maybe we'll talk about some ways to change it. And we'll see if Blake, like last episode, still thinks like maybe it's okay to do it. And then you guys can make your own judgments, because that's what's cool about sports is everybody's right until you get on the court and see who wins.
That's why you have to play the game.
That's right.
That's why they play the game.
You are who we thought you were. Crown them. I'm just saying.
Are who you thought they were.
Just saying random coach things now. We are going to spend a lot of time on the NBA. Tanking happens in other sports too, but it's primarily in the NBA, mostly because of how much one player can change the outcome. Somebody like LeBron James, with minimal changes to Cavaliers teams a couple of times, shows up and makes a big difference because there's only 5 guys on the floor. Baseball, you have guys in development for years, sometimes before they show up. So you know who a good prospect is, but even sometimes they don't pan out the way they should, and they get stuck in the minor leagues and you never hear from them. The NFL has so many players, and their draft has guys from 1st to 7th round that end up being good players, that it's hard. I mean, obviously there are guys that go number 1, number 2, number 3 that we know are going to be stars, and it works out, but
mostly quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, so there's plenty of other spots where it's not as prevalent. Hockey does have some tanking, because one guy can show up and be good right off the bat.
They can score enough goals to potentially.
Yeah.
But then again, you got like Connor McDavid, who has led the league in scoring multiple times.
Yeah, and the Oilers can't get out.
And they can't. Yeah, and they still aren't winning. So
maybe not. But there is some level to it. So we're going to spend most of our discussion today in the NBA. And then we'll get to some interesting ways to do it that pertain to all sports. So if you're not an NBA fan, stick with us. This is still going to be fun for everybody. So let's get straight into it. The biggest question for today's episode is, does tanking work?
Well, it has to sometimes, right? On some occasions, it pays off.
Otherwise, nobody would do it.
Sure, like
It has to work.
right, and the earliest I hate to say documented because it's not like a legal form where they're like,
Yeah,
we the Houston Rockets of 1983-1984 declare
that
like,
we are tanking.
that
Yeah.
doesn't happen. So, but that is the first instance of outwardly tanking. So about the halfway point, they are around 500. The 83-84 Rockets team, they are around 500, like 20-20, or like whatever the about. Oh yeah, that would be about right. They're about 20-20. They go the rest of the season far under 500, far under 500
I
because
wonder why. Yeah,
because the prime prospect of that year was Hakeem Olajuwon.
the dream.
So they tank, they get the first pick, they get Hakeem. Now, they didn't go on to be the greatest team of the era. Hakeem didn't go on to be the most well-known player in this draft.
That's right.
But in the 2 years that player, Michael Jordan, didn't win the NBA titles, the years between his 2 three-peats, who won?
It's Hakeem Olajuwon and the Rockets.
The Rockets won in 94 and 95. So, not only did Hakeem likely bring spectators to the arena,
Well, it's a hometown kid too. He played college basketball at Houston.
University of Houston, so that was a big deal. There's another instance of that. Not only was he a hometown kid staying at home and eventually 10 years later winning the title, back to back, I might say, he had to bring fans. He had to bring viewership. So, in multiple ways, this instance worked, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And the Bulls, caveat, the Bulls of 1983-84, they didn't tank.
They're just bad.
They were just awful.
That's still like the traveling cocaine circus.
The cocaine
Yeah.
circus. Yeah, they were just god awful, terrible. So that 1984 draft, okay, that year, the number 1 overall pick was Hakeem Olajuwon. Number 2 was Sam Bowie by Portland.
R.I.P. Unfortunate pick, but they did it for the right reasons. They already had Drexler, but that's okay.
It was in their heart.
Yeah.
Number 3 was Jordan. Number 4 was Sam Perkins. Shout out.
Sam Perkins, a good NBA player for his entire career.
Shout out. Number 5, the 76ers took Charles Barkley.
Charles Barkley, all-time great. Right there.
All-time great. So
Down the list, I think somebody.
John Stockton
Yeah.
was 16. I mean, you can't go wrong there.
Plenty of not even just good players, like 50 greatest all-time players in this draft.
Yeah, John Stockton, best point guard of all time, potentially.
Potentially,
He still holds the record for all-time assists and all-time steals,
I believe.
I think.
Yep.
And
If
so
not.
he was what? What did I say? He was 16th.
Yeah.
16th. Not even a lottery pick at the time.
Yeah.
Because that year, he wouldn't have been in the worst teams of that season. There were 24 teams in the league that year, and he was picked 16th.
So he's on a playoff team.
In Utah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were a playoff team and still got the greatest point guard of all time. But they never won a championship.
Nope, because Jordan was there, and various other teams in the West got in the way.
Yep. Even with Malone, Karl Malone being drafted too,
Yeah.
they never won a championship.
But in that case, 1984, a loaded draft, tanking pays off, right? Houston gets Hakeem Olajuwon, which is amazing. Jordan goes to the Bulls, not tanking, but still, being bad was a good thing
Yep.
In-
Being bad was rewarded.
in
which-
1984.
Shout out to our first episode where we laid that out.
Yeah.
The next instance, the next biggest instance, was 2003.
Obviously.
Hinted on that before as well, just in regards to fan attendance in the league at the time. But in 03, the Cleveland Cavaliers were just terrible,
Mhm.
but they also knew what was coming, and it was another hometown kid like Olajuwon and LeBron James just up the road in Akron, and they ended up taking him. Well, what would they have gotten if they didn't tank? If they weren't the absolute worst team and they didn't win the lottery, Darko Milicic was second, went to Detroit.
Oh, man. That is a name. Like, I knew that the Pistons picked a bad player, and I knew that it was useless, but I just hadn't heard
Darko Milicic.
in so long. That's unfortunate for him. Shout out Darko, wherever you are.
Wherever you are today. Carmelo Anthony, third to the Denver Nuggets. Chris Bosh, fourth to the Toronto Raptors. Dwayne Wade, fifth to Miami. And then goes on and on. David West was the 18th pick out of Xavier.
Long career
Bro,
for good teams.
he was there forever.
long career for good teams.
Mhm.
I mean, I guess not as long as some of these other guys. I don't know if he's still in the league actually, but still, he was on really good teams.
Boris Diaw
Also,
has
on
been
really
a
good
solid NBA player for a long, long time.
teams.
Leandro Barbosa
Man, those Suns teams with
from the
Barbosa.
Sun, from the Steve Nash, Sean Marion Suns teams.
Yeah.
They never won anything though. Kendrick Perkins.
Yeah.
I didn't realize he was that old.
Yeah, well, and he had a shorter career than these guys just because his position faded out. He's not a tall guy, but he is a post guy, and there's no room for that 6'8", 6'9" post player that can't really do anything else in today's
He's just too big.
NBA.
Yeah,
just,
I mean,
just a strange position.
because today you've got 7-foot players shooting threes.
Yeah, and that wasn't his game. He was a true post
No,
player.
he was. I mean, he was 6'8", 6'9", but he was like 260, 270. He's not dribbling the ball anywhere.
No. And so, an Andre Drummond or Hassan Whiteside that's 7 foot and is skilled around the rim, you can still have those. But Kendrick Perkins just kind of lost his spot as time went on. But yeah, that's another good pick deep in that draft. 03 draft.
David West, by the way, played 15 seasons.
15 seasons.
So he's done.
So he's done. And LeBron's still in the league. Wade is done. Melo is having
somehow
a resurgence
coming
right now.
back. Yeah, he's going off.
But still on the way of being done. LeBron, by virtue of being a high school player, is the last one standing, kind of that group.
Just got more years left in the tank, right?
Yeah. But again, this situation, the tanking worked. They get LeBron. Everything is sunny until LeBron leaves, and then it's sunny again when he comes back. But you can't help that part.
No.
The rules are set up so that the players don't leave, but sometimes they still do.
Sometimes it happens.
You can't do anything about that, but it works. So 84, the Rockets get Hakeem. That's fantastic. 03, the Cavs tank to get LeBron, and it works. That's fantastic. We've also got kind of a modern example right now, the one most of you are familiar with in the it works camp, but maybe in the it doesn't work camp as well, is the current Philadelphia 76ers, the process.
Trust the process, right?
Sam Hinkie trusting the process all the way to the unemployment line. Couldn't get to see it finish, but
what did they get? Now we can talk about I'll talk about the fan attendance rates first.
okay.
2012-2013 was like prime 76ers bad. Supposedly in that year, they weren't outwardly tanking. That might be up for discussion.
Alleged.
2012-2013 76ers, their average fan attendance was 16,717, which was 22nd out of 30 teams in the league. They go on for the next 3 years to outwardly, quote unquote, rebuild.
Yeah,
That was the terminology.
Mhm.
We're not tanking, we're rebuilding.
Mm-hmm. Intentionally getting injured players,
Yes.
young injured players, but injured players
Yep.
being bad, not putting a good roster out there.
So in 2014, 2015, and 2016, they were outwardly rebuilding, I'll say. They went from having 16,000 fans plus to 13,000, 13,000, and 14,000. Those numbers ranked in the league were 29th, 30th, and 30th. So not only, they were bad. They were a bad team. They weren't bringing fans to the arenas. It was just a really bad situation. The next 2 years in 17 and 18, they were not tanking, quote unquote. They had laid their foundation.
Mhm.
At that point, they were averaging 17,000 plus and then 20,000 plus. So they crawled out of the bottom from 30th in the league in fan attendance to 23rd and then 3rd.
Started from the bottom.
Now where are they?
Indeed, where?
Nobody knows. So those draft picks, though, what did they get for tanking?
Right.
Well, in 2014, their first outwardly tanking year, they drafted Joel Embiid 3rd overall.
Who was hurt at the time. And
They knew it.
couldn't use him
They
for
knew-
either most of or the entire first year.
Yep, I'm not sure that he played full minutes for multiple years.
Yeah. Knew he was hurt.
Yep, knew he was hurt. The next year wasn't the best pick. It was Jahlil Okafor. He didn't work out there.
Mhm.
I don't know where he is now, but he didn't work out there. The following year in 2016, their last quote unquote tanking year, Ben Simmons first overall.
Mm-hmm.
If he could shoot a freaking three,
He made one this year.
he made one.
He made one this year.
If he could shoot, man,
It
could
would
you
work out.
imagine?
It'd be a different world.
And then Markelle Fultz was their number one, the first overall draft pick in 2017. And then after that, they got some role players, but that was the core, right?
Yep.
They had.
I think they also traded a pick for Nerlens Noel.
They eventually got Nerlens Noel too in the middle of all that,
and he was hurt as well.
Who was already hurt? They
Yes.
knew it. He didn't work out either. He's not there anymore, right? He's in the Pelicans.
Yes.
So, Embiid, we'll leave out Okafor. Embiid, Simmons, and Fultz. I mean, that's solid. But you're doing it on purpose. You're intentionally losing, and that's what they got. They got Embiid, who is now an all-star, probably one of the better centers, top 5 centers in the league, maybe. I would say he's probably top 5 in the league. Ben Simmons is a rock star, a 6'10" point guard.
Yeah, just kind of but can't shoot.
But gosh,
Can't shoot. But one day.
maybe if they, that might be the difference.
Yeah. But for the record, they also got Markelle Fultz, who is just a basket case. God bless him, but like he can't shoot.
Yeah.
And
What
it's
can
all
he
in his
do?
head. It's like the yips. Like he just can't do it.
And when he does, it's ugly.
Yeah, and he's gone. Like it's like, I mean, it's not the extent of Charles Barkley swinging a golf club, but it is like just a broken mechanic that he's tried to fix so many times that
Like Shaq's free throws.
yeah. So in with the good.
Comes bad, right?
Yeah.
And so their best finish up until this point. This is still in progress, right? We're still in the process.
Right, they've added pieces. Jimmy Butler last year.
Jimmy
and
Butler.
some other things in and out.
In and out, right? And the best finish was a conference semifinal last season in the 2018-2019 season. They lost on a heartbreaking shot
Mm-hmm.
to Kawhi Leonard and the Raptors.
Front of the rim, back of the rim,
Boing, boing, boing.
through the net.
Finally in. Just unbelievable shot. If you haven't seen it, Google it. But that's the closest they've gotten, and we're still in it. They could add another piece. They might win it. I don't know. My bet is no.
They're on that precipice. We use the big words. They're on the edge of that seesaw of is this the ceiling, like, or are we going to go over the top and take another step?
Because there's a time limit on this, right? Like if you have a process,
Yeah.
you have a rebuild, you have a tank, you have a time limit where the players that you choose, they're just gonna not be in their prime at some point. Like everybody grows out of it, everybody gets old. So when you do leave that point, like where I don't know if they've reached the pinnacle. I don't know if they've reached their potential
Right.
because they're also young. I mean,
Yes.
Embiid was drafted 6 years ago. He's only been in the league 6 years, but he came in with injuries. He'll probably go out because of an injury. That's just the nature of his position. He's just a really big guy. So it's likely that he could just go out with an injury. Who knows when that'll be? Hopefully, for their sake, hopefully they win something before he leaves.
Yeah.
Or before he ends his career, probably his knees. It's got to be his knees. It's every big guy's knees.
Big guys, knees and backs.
Knees. Well, it's a lot of weight. They can't help it.
But yeah, so but maybe some teams around them do things to get worse. Toronto certainly lost Kawhi, but
That's a threat.
stayed a pretty good team. Boston added Kemba Walker this year to a set of pieces they already had. Jason Tatum's getting better, so
Hayward.
there's something to deal with. Hayward's still coming off a catastrophic injury, he's probably not going to reach whatever his prime was before that, but he could continue to get better from where he came back from,
Sure.
which wasn't where he was.
Right.
And so you got to worry about maybe Boston stays ahead of them. Some other teams, Indiana looks fresh and new. Maybe they continue to grow. So you just don't know if they've got what it takes doing that process. But we'll put them soundly in the it could work category.
It definitely could. I mean, again,
They did get pieces.
their time is not up. So, I mean, they definitely have the ability to work. But by season, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
By season, the 2015-2016 season for the 76ers, They went 10-72. All not top 10 worst all time, I don't think.
The inverse of the second best record ever.
Yeah, but not in the top 10 of the worst.
Yeah.
The worst of the worst is worse. But they finished 5th in the Atlantic. The next season they won 28 games. 4th in the Atlantic. The next season in 2018 they won 52 games. That was still only 3rd in their division.
Yeah.
Which is
tough division.
But they lost in the conference semifinals to the Celtics in 5 games. Then the following season, the last season, the 2019 season, was their best playoff run up until this point. They took the Raptors, the eventual NBA champions, to 7 games and lost on that Kawhi shot. You have to go with what you have and hope it's the best. I'm just not sure. They might have reached their potential. As a core, I mean, without adding any more pieces. Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid might not be good enough to be like a Kobe Shaq.
Right.
And to win one, much less go 3 in a row.
Yeah. So they could evolve into a clear situation where it works clearly, or they could fall into a situation where it was all for a second, years of disappointment and nothing, or all to be a second round loser.
But again, there's something to be said for 3rd in the league in fan attendance.
Sure.
Right?
People are clearly enjoying the product now.
Yeah.
They're into it. They're excited. So they've not jumped the shark, I guess, in terms of where the fans are in it. But you got to be careful with that because easily it could. You get tired of watching 4th place all the time.
Again, like an Embiid injury, and they're right back in the lottery.
Yeah.
Like they're not so far ahead that they are that close to being at the bottom again without trying.
Yeah, because they were the 6th seed this year in the East, so it's not far off. In some other sports, particularly in baseball, there's some other alleged clear examples of tanking that paid off big time. The Astros
with an asterisk.
With the Asteriscos, they had a stretch where they had a minimal payroll, questionable whether or not they had 25 major league quality players on their major league roster, and just saved a lot of money because, again, baseball doesn't have a salary floor. You can pay the league minimum to all 25 of your players and be in compliance. And so they really cut some corners. But as a young group of players, which they did get through some high draft picks, got together, they put together a Major League Championship World Series winning roster.
They had a squad.
Albeit with the help of trash cans. So, whatever.
Boom, boom.
Some people say the Cubs engaged in their own process leading into their World Championships. That's slightly unclear, but Theo Epstein did get there and struggled for a little bit and mentioned the same kind of words about process and it takes time and this kind of thing.
But did the same thing in Boston.
But did the same thing in Boston.
Theo Epstein pulled both of the longest losing, I should say,
franchises. Yeah.
Yeah. So the 2 teams that had gone the longest without winning a World Series, he turned them both.
Yeah, he gets them both out of the
flipped them both.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, shout out.
Which is amazing.
I might name my son Theo.
He is the miracle worker. But he did get some high-profile prospects through this and then put together a team around them. So that's another chance where if it was tanking, it did work. Some people go and say the current Lakers, they had a long time between playoff runs.
From when Kobe left.
Before Kobe left.
From before, yeah.
To now, a big playoff drought that I guess I didn't identify with because the Lakers are the way people think of the Yankees and some other big franchises where it's like, hey, if you're not winning, like if you're in it, people watch, but if you're not winning, people are a little bit happy that you're out of it. Right. Because it's just been so good for so long. But yeah, they've had a long drought. And the way that they get Anthony Davis and the way that they get have cap space for LeBron 2 off seasons ago, some people are saying that's tanking because they traded pieces to get AD. But AD was up for sale to anybody. Don't know that they did that on purpose. They didn't know Anthony Davis was going to be available to be traded.
I'm not convinced that the Lakers could be classified as tanking.
And if they were tanking and the goal was to have Julius Randle, I believe he was part of the trade, Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball, if that was your goal, Kyle Kuzma around LeBron, I'm not sure that was ever going to work.
That might be similar to the Cavaliers team that LeBron took to the finals on his back and got swept by the Spurs.
Right. And so in which case you could have done that without tanking.
Right.
Just line your contracts up right, sign LeBron, and then put role players around him, which is the other way of doing it. So I'm not sure that they did tank. So those are some examples that we know did work
To a degree.
to a degree. Now, for what I think is more prevalent, in
Right,
my
right.
opinion, these are some of the examples where they did not work. The most famous example, the one that gets talked about the most, I think, is the teams that were tanking to get Tim Duncan in the '97 draft.
That was quite a run for the bottom.
Yes.
That was a race to the bottom of the league.
Boston, the Celtics that year were clearly tanking for Tim Duncan. They wanted the number 1 pick. It was going to be everything. They were the worst team in the NBA that year. They had a terrible record, and they did not get the number 1 pick. Right? We mentioned in our last episode. You can go back again and take a look at that, or listen to that. Don't watch your phone. That's odd.
Just stare at us.
Yeah, so take a listen to that. But because the lottery odds are the way they were then, it was a little bit different than now. You actually had a less or a higher percentage chance of not getting the number 1 pick than you did of getting the number 1 pick. You had the most ping pong balls in the lottery, but you weren't guaranteed, and they did not get the number 1 pick.
Nope.
Instead of being number 1, they fell all the way to 3. And so they did not get Tim Duncan. They were poor on purpose to get this franchise-changing generational talent that we know San Antonio got.
Won 5 titles in San Antonio.
And by the way, they didn't get him by tanking. They got him by the virtue of David Robinson being hurt and the team imploding around him. It was just happenstance that they get, kind of like the Warriors this year.
The Warriors
getting
are going
the
to
second pick.
Yeah, and the Bulls. Jordan got hurt. That's how they got Pippen.
Right. So we get these times where good teams get great players by just luck. But so they didn't tank. The Celtics did, and were rewarded with
Chauncey Billups.
big shot Chauncey, which no knock on Chauncey Billups.
Oh no. He won one in Detroit.
Yes, he wins championships. He plays well. He's a great point guard.
Great point guard, probably.
for the generation specifically.
Yes.
But he's not Tim Duncan, and he certainly wasn't anything in
Rick,
Boston.
not to Rick Pitino.
Yeah, which is a whole different thing about how Rick Pitino just could not coach in the NBA on his Celtics tenure. But he ran him out after a year, right? Chauncey was gone.
Chauncey played in Boston for 1 season, or maybe even less.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he finished a whole season. But yeah, he wasn't there long.
And they stayed in the lottery. Pitino wasn't there much longer. I know they got Paul Pierce as a late lottery pick at one point. And so that did not at all work out for the Boston Celtics. Another example is right here close to home for us, and assumedly many of you who are listening to us. But shout out if you're from somewhere other than North Carolina.
Yeah.
Growing our fan base. We love to see it. Here in Charlotte, well, not here in Charlotte, but, in North Carolina.
North Carolina.
The Bobcats / Hornets organization attempted to tank once. Were the worst team in the league with Kemba Walker already. Just put nothing around him because Anthony Davis was coming.
Kentucky.
From Kentucky.
The
Anthony
Brow.
Davis was going to be here. Anthony Davis was going to pair with Kemba Walker.
Which might have been an all-time great pairing. I mean, like, such an athletic center with such a great point guard. You can imagine, like, that could have been great. That could have been all-time great.
Just an otherworldly type situation. Instead of getting Anthony Davis by being one of the worst teams in NBA history, instead of getting the number 1 pick, the Charlotte Bobcats at the time were awarded the number 2 pick.
And what did they get for that?
With that number 2 pick, they got Michael Kidd Gilchrist.
Another Kentucky guy?
MKG, yep, was another Kentucky guy.
That was a squad. Shout out to that Kentucky squad.
That team was loaded. That team was loaded, but they didn't get who they wanted.
Nope.
Now we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but they didn't get who they wanted. They also didn't get a good player that was available to them outside of Anthony Davis. That was a very good draft. We mentioned these 84 and 03 drafts being good ones, but this one was too. AD was the number one pick. Bradley Beal was 3. Deion Waiters was 4. Damian Lillard is 6.
Wow.
Harrison Barnes is 7. Andre
Shout out.
Drummond is 9. Just going down the list, there's some other some role players here that are good rotational player, Terrence Jones, as we go through the rest of the first round. So they didn't get who they wanted.
But what
Tanking.
a lottery that was.
But there were players there, and they also screwed it up, which, again, it was the same thing with the Celtics before. There were players there that they could have gotten. But, again, this is an example where being bad to get that player that you know is going to work out, the equivalent of getting Hakeem, the equivalent of getting Jordan, these two examples, they did not work out for the teams that were trying to get it. So they got nothing. And if you know anything about that Bobcats Hornets, franchise from that point forward, 1 playoff appearance.
Last 10 years.
That's the reward for the tanking. Kemba Walker does become an all-star and an all-NBA player and then leaves.
He's out.
Because of some circumstances that just were there. This actually happens more often than you may think. So we dug up some numbers in the NBA and also a nice scholarly article that we're going to cite here in a little bit too. But they both kind of found the same thing. So here's a little bit about our own numbers. Just an overview, then we're going to get into some of the players. The number 1 pick has the most likely spot. That's the most likely spot individually to find a player who will become an All-NBA player. We looked at the last 10 All-NBA teams. So that's first, second, and third teams for the last 10 seasons. And we looked at where they were drafted. Number 1 is the most common. So having the number 1 pick, as we said, is a good thing. But as a range, picks 5 through 14 is where you are most likely to find an All-NBA player. So it's not number 1, and it's also not what we consider like the top of the picks, because now it's the top 4 picks that you get through the lottery.
Yep.
So it's not one of those picks where you find the most All-NBA players. It's 5 through 14, and I understand that that's a 9-pick range.
Yep.
But still, though there are high quality.
That's the last 3/4 of the lottery.
And in that space are just good players.
Yep. A lot of
that you can build a team around.
Yep.
We just mentioned a lot of them in this 2012 draft that had Anthony Davis in it.
Just shout out to a few of the 5 through 14 picks. Paul George, Steph Curry, Dame Lillard, Kemba Walker, DeMar DeRozan, Andre Drummond, Klay Thompson, DeMarcus Cousins, Joakim Noah, ?
Yeah, that's one of those ones.
But
that's one of the cool things about doing this is there's some players in here. It's like, yeah, do you remember when Joakim Noah was the best power forward in the NBA for a season?
Yeah, Kevin Love tried in Minnesota and ended up winning later. Kobe Bryant.
Right, high school pick.
Kobe Bryant, high school pick, went 13th overall.
That's right.
And, of course, all NBA, all time, everywhere. Any list you could put a great player on, he's on it. Dwayne Wade was 5. Andrew Bynum, again, ?
Like how was he an All-NBA?
He might have. Let me guess. Was he 13 once?
He was 13 once. Yes.
Okay.
He was 13 once, and I believe it was the last year I used for data. So.
And then Dirk Nowitzki, Amari Stoudemire.
Yeah.
Who could have been. I don't know, man. Those Suns
in a
teams.
different era too. The end of his career matched up with this space and pace game, but.
Yep.
A different era, that guy's ridiculous.
Yeah, and so those are the kinds of players that you're getting in this not top 4 but lottery caliber teams.
And if you're listening to this saying, okay, but that's a big range, whatever. Well, I'm gonna blow up the range even more and tell you this that may blow your mind because it did mine. We typically think that once you get outside the lottery, you're finding bargain bin pickups. In the second round in particular, you're getting guys that are just going to help you rotationally. Maybe they fill a gap, a low salary player that lets you do other things creatively with your roster. But outside of the lottery, All right, so the 50, I believe it's 58 players,
57.
57 players that have been named All NBA in the last 10 years. There are more of them that were drafted outside of the lottery than were drafted number one. Now, again, that's one pick versus
30 picks.
the rest of the draft after 14. But still, more players from outside the lottery than the number one pick. So the number one pick is not necessarily a sure thing. And we know this from just recent experience. A guy like Anthony Bennett is the number one pick. Andrew Wiggins was a high pick. I don't remember if he was number one or not.
I think he was.
Those kind of guys not necessarily going to work out. And here's the biggest thing: only four more players that were picked 1 through 4 ended up on an All NBA team than players outside the lottery in general. Second round picks make up 7 of the 58, which don't sound like a lot, but it's 12%.
12%-ish.
The number one pick only makes up 17%
So 10
of the players.
10 of the 57. So the second round picks, this might surprise you: Nikola Jokic.
Yep.
Isaiah Thomas.
One-time All-NBA.
Who was once.
Yeah.
But Draymond Green, DeAndre Jordan, Mark Gasol. Pau Gasol, his brother, was third. Mark went 48th.
No love for the Gasol.
Yeah, that those Thanksgivings were probably awkward for a while. Goran Dragic.
Again, Goran Dragic, All-NBA player. Who knew?
And Manu Ginobili went 57th overall. Great all-time Spur.
Great all-time Spur. Close to great all-time NBA player.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, 7 dudes drafted outside of the first round are All-NBA players. 10 guys in that list were number one picks. Now, that primarily some of those are because guys were in the same draft, things like that. And if you're wondering why the certain picks, here's actually the overall for each range. 17.5% of those All-NBA players the last 10 seasons were the number one pick. 21.1 were picks 2 to 4. 5 through 14, that's the back end of the lottery, 29.8%. 15 through 30, so those are your playoff teams. 19% were there, and then 31 plus. So the second round is 12.1%. If you're wondering why, a group did a scholarly article, again, because sometimes scholars do cool things like research sports. The article's called "Does It Pay to Build Through the Draft?" in the National Basketball Association. It appeared in the article in Journal of Sports Economics. 4 authors on it. They found that something that we already know, if you're a fan of one of these teams, the Washington football teams, the Charlotte Hornets, the Seattle Mariners, right? These teams that always lose, Cleveland Browns. They found, they looked at how many games you improved depending on draft position, and then they looked at how many games you would improve with a specific general manager in the NBA. And they found that by and large, the pickers mattered far more than the picks
Say
themselves.
that again. Tell the people.
So you got to listen to this now. The pickers matter more than the picks. Being able to evaluate talent and to see who's going to translate into your sport the best
And fit in with your team.
and fit in with your team, those things are more important than where you pick. There's a reason that the Warriors picked Steph Curry and Klay Thompson outside of those high lottery picks. I believe 7 and 11.
And then Draymond in the second round.
And Draymond in the second round and put together a big team that would win. There's a reason that the same franchise was able to pick KD, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden, and Serge Ibaka and some other pieces. There's a reason that those teams constantly rack up things. There's a reason that the Spurs, yes, they got lucky with Tim Duncan. Everything fell in the same place. But there's a reason that there were 3 generations of Spurs teams that continuously made the playoffs until this year.
Mm-hmm.
It's because the man that was doing the picking knew what he was doing. He's able, after the first go around, to pair Tony Parker and Manu Ginobili with him. He's the same guy that picks Kawhi Leonard, who also is an All-NBA player that did not come
what
from
a
high
sleeper.
pick.
Yeah, what a sleeper there.
He also eventually does what it takes to build a 3rd generation of Spurs teams around LaMarcus Aldridge
And DeRozan.
and DeRozan until this year when they don't make the playoffs. But it was a strong West, so that's another thing. The pickers matter more. There's a reason the Charlotte Hornets or Charlotte Bobcats fall to number 2, and they get MKG, who is going to be a rotational player for his NBA career. But they could have gotten Damian Lillard. Again, I understand they already had Kemba Walker, but Andre Drummond is there. They don't have a center. Several other players that could have helped them were below. Bradley Beal's a shooting guard. To go with Kemba Walker would have made a big difference as well. You constantly see, if you look at the Utah Jazz, Rudy Gobert is an All-NBA player that was a 27th pick.
Mm-hmm.
They also have, that's the team, when everybody's sleeping on Donovan Mitchell, the Jazz are the organization, same one that's got Rudy Gobert, the Jazz are the organization that picks up Donovan Mitchell. So just tanking doesn't necessarily translate to success. And they found the same numbers we did, that sometimes that 2 through 4 pick is not where you want to be, that being later in the lottery is good, and that being a playoff team, by the way, you improve more from year to year as a playoff team. I know that goes against what we think, especially those lower level playoff teams.
Yep.
But on average, you improve more as a playoff team than you do as a team getting these high draft picks.
What a revelation!
It's crazy, right? Like it's the exact opposite conceptually of what you think, but it's something we all know.
Yeah.
Like, my general manager sucks, my owner sucks, my whatever sucks. And it turns out that, yes.
Yeah, they actually do. Welcome to the Cleveland Browns organization.
Yeah, that's not a fan complaint. That's a real thing.
That's a fact.
If you cannot get out of your own way, if your team is always losing, it's because somebody in that front office is terrible at
They're
their
just doing
job.
it wrong. Like, Theo Epstein comes in and flops 2 franchises from extraordinary losers to World Series champions. He did it twice. That's not happenstance. It happenstance if it happens once.
Yeah.
Then you leave, start another all-in terrible project with the Cubs, and then you make them win too.
Yeah.
Theo Epstein should be on Mount Rushmore.
Indeed. Should he not? So, there are your examples of sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and why kind of it does and doesn't work, more or less.
So what do we do about it?
Yeah. If you're like me, you think that just in general, the non-competitive part of this, and it doesn't work enough for you to risk your whole franchise on it. What do we do to fix it? There's several examples of people who are trying to come up with ways to fix it, both specifically in the NBA and in just in general.
What's your favorite?
I think my favorite is actually this tournament idea.
Okay.
So you take all the teams that don't make the playoffs.
So in the NBA, it'd be 14 teams.
14 teams. And you put them in a tournament to determine who the number 1 pick is. And the winner of that tournament is the number 1 pick. And you could even do the lottery in reverse, right? So you might need to do some knockout rounds wherever to break ties because 7 teams are going to lose in the first round, right? And this rewards, there's no incentive to tank. Being bad, losing 72 games does nothing to help your process. You have an incentive to put the best team you can on the floor to start the season and to put the best team on the floor every game. And the teams that are mediocre, those teams that would try to tank, because why are we playing hard? Why are we don't have anything we can change? We're at the cap. We can't do anything better, and we're getting players in the middle of the lottery that we can't hit on because we're bad general managers. Those teams have no incentive to tear it all apart because they are the best team in the tournament and could win the number 1 pick.
But what happens when you are constantly mediocre? You're never in the lottery, right? And then what happens when you make it to this tournament and you continuously lose anyway, and your general manager's terrible?
So then you're just stuck, and that's when you got to fire the general manager.
Well, that's the thing is like that would be a scenario in which like you wouldn't be tanking, but you'd get to the same end result.
Yeah, you just could constantly bad and people lose interest. And that is one of the downside, because eventually if enough people lose interest for enough time and there's no hope, that's when you have teams starting to move. And that's not a good look for any league.
But on its face, in theory, like in all these other things, in theory, the best team out of the bottom 16 in the NBA would end up with the number 1 pick. So, again, in theory, it makes you compete.
Mm-hmm.
you're the worst team in this tournament. You end up with what, the 14th?
14th pick, yeah.
There's still plenty of players out there.
Yeah.
Which is the case now.
Yes. We
But-
just miss on them. And
yeah.
part of that's the draft industry, right? Why we miss some of these guys. Because Steph Curry, in hindsight, we know
Should have gone one.
that he's number one. But not even in hindsight knowing his career. I think if you took college basketball fans from the last year he was in college and said, where should Steph Curry go?
2008, 2009, right?
Yeah. Before the whole draft talk started, everybody would say, oh, he's probably the number one pick.
I
Or
mean,
he's the number two, number three, number
shooting
four.
lights out at Davidson.
But he goes to 7 mostly because like bad ankles and people talk themselves up and he's going to get hurt, which he did.
He was small. I think that was his biggest con coming out of Davidson was his size.
Yeah.
And he was a shooting guard, not a point guard.
Yeah.
He has worked really hard to improve his ball handling. Like his entire warm up, he doesn't need to warm up shooting, even though he does.
Just dribble.
It's you just see him like 2 balls at a time, and that's what he worked on, and he's become an elite point guard
Yes.
who is also going to end up being the best 3-point shooter of all time.
Right.
By far, he's gonna blow everybody out of the water in
Yeah.
made threes all time.
Easily. So that's one idea, though, is a tournament for the number one pick. I don't know if that's my favorite. That's the most outrageous one, right? That's the goofy one. That's the
I
for
don't know.
fun.
Okay, so here's my favorite,
Okay.
and this is because we watch a lot of European soccer.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, the promotion relegation system in Europe, and this may go hand in hand with another potential fix, but the promotion relegation thing, it's got there's a lot of moving pieces, right? So if you do a promotion relegation, you then directly tie the NBA to the G League, and like as a stepping stone, right? But so the top 30 NBA teams, and then however many teams are in the G League, the bottom 3 teams bottom 4 maybe in a 30-team league, would get relegated to the G League. So imagine being the Bobcats. You're the worst. Say you didn't do it on purpose because you don't want to get relegated, but you get kicked down a league. You get kicked down, and then you're playing the Greensboro Swarm.
And nobody wants to do that.
Nobody wants to do that.
And nobody wants to watch that.
No. So there's a lot of incentive there. Even at the bottom, you see Premier League teams fighting. Like, they're crying because they get to stay in the Premier League.
Or they're excited when they get promoted.
Or they're excited, like this year, Leeds United. They win the English Championship, the 2nd division, and they're crying because they get to go play in the Premier League. They get to go play soccer in Old Trafford.
Against,
That is a dream for these kids.
the oldest stadiums, the best players.
Yeah,
that's
that
where
is
they're going to be.
you get to be on the field with the greatest players in the world. Now, are you ever going to play for that team? Maybe,
Probably
maybe
not.
not.
Yeah.
But
And it helps the team, too. Like, there's more money involved.
right, you get
in
more
being
money
in
in
the
being
higher league.
you get money for being in the Premier League. So that's one issue. And then of course the winner of the G League, because they should have a tournament in this scenario. They have a tournament, and the best G League team of the year gets to play against NBA teams.
Right, they move up.
They move up a level. So, and that kind of goes along with this third idea of eliminating the draft.
Which I think is my favorite,
You think so?
in all honesty. Eliminating the draft.
Just everybody's a free agent.
And in both of these situations, we should say, are just for an American sports public, would be outrageous kind of new ideas. It would take some selling to make it
Hard, yeah. It can be hard to wrap your head around like this being a good idea because this is the way it's always been.
Yeah.
Of course, where you don't like change.
But at least for eliminating the draft, there is some precedent here for that. It was only for baseball until 1965 that there was actually a player draft. In baseball, it worked this way. You just signed players and you stashed them in minor leagues. And we didn't always have structured, this is my AAA, AA, single A team. You just found a guy that was playing AA baseball and you signed him and you left him sitting there, kind of like they do in soccer,
Yep.
where you loan a player out. And so your player development comes from just finding good guys that are good and signing them. So you still have a salary cap, right? So Zion Williamson, instead of being the number one pick and everybody trying to be bad to get Zion, well, now you can just offer him a max contract.
But so then what
And-
happens? What happens with college sports?
That would be
That's
the
a
downside.
huge question. Like college basketball is my favorite
Yeah.
sport season year round. Right, it's
Mhm.
my favorite thing to watch. So Does college basketball become irrelevant?
Maybe not. Maybe
Do they not even play in college anymore?
Maybe you still, which that's being a thing now with the G League select team. They're taking
Or-
guys that would have been there.
LaMelo Ball goes and plays in Australia, and he's about to be picked number 1.
Right, you make some money for a year and then you move on. Maybe they keep these requirements in the NFL that you got to be 3 years out of school to be draft eligible. In baseball, it's got you can go out of high school, but if not, you got to wait 3 years. Maybe basketball keeps their one and done rule, 2 and done, or they do what they're probably about to do and just say anybody can come, which was the way it was before.
Sure.
So there are downsides, but at least in the eliminating the draft thing, it's back to it opens it up more, because now if you're a team that has cap space to give a max contract to Zion Williamson, you can, but that means somewhere some other player is available to be picked up. That's a zero-sum game too.
Sure.
You can't offer max contract space to the big free agent that's coming up and also be able to get the best young player. And you would get teams, I think actually strategy-wise, roster building, you get like different strategies. Some teams are going to want to look at free agents and older guys, and some teams are going to be willing to pay younger players to just show up.
Sure.
And build teams differently. And it is kind of like, I don't know, that it feels on the surface, eliminating the draft feels like the most American way of doing it. Like you get to
Just
pick
abandon it.
Yeah, I'm going to pick where I'm going to work, and I'm going to work where whoever will give me the best opportunity for me.
Yeah.
And the team's jobs then are to provide that opportunity. I mean, I think that's the cool part of that.
And the Mavericks organization is doing a cool thing similar to European sports, where they have the academy.
Yeah, they've got an AAU academy attached to the organization.
Straight to the organization. So, and again, back to European soccer, that would be an interesting way to attract young kids. Like Lionel Messi started playing for Barcelona when he was a boy,
Yes.
and he's like 34 now.
Mm-hmm.
He worked all the way up, and I think he made his first team debut at like 16 or 17. But would the NBA go for letting a 16-year-old play on the first team?
Probably not. Or maybe they do if they're good enough.
But like a 16-year-old LeBron James, but see, that's the difference, is like the separation of education and sports, right? Messi was playing on the first team in Barcelona when he was supposed to be like a sophomore or a junior in high school by normal standards. So what happens when LeBron James is signed by the Cleveland Cavaliers? Because he's
at 16,
spoiler,
17 years old. Yeah.
Spoiler, he's staying in Ohio, regardless of whether he was drafted number 1 or he's a free agent. He can go play anywhere. He's probably staying home. So what happens when you're going to LeBron James is a grown freaking man at 16 years old.
Yeah,
he's 6'8", 240 out of high school. He's got the physical ability, the size. And of course he was good enough.
Yeah. He
could go straight into the NBA. He went straight into the NBA out of high school, first number 1 overall pick. You know the story. But like somebody like a Kobe Bryant, he was later in the lottery, turned out to be,
but would have been a high price,
right. But how much? These situations. But how much do you trust? Like Tracy McGrady, straight out of high school, wasn't a number 1 overall pick. He was later. So do you trust those younger guys? If it's an all-time generational talent like a Messi in soccer and a LeBron James in basketball, you probably trust LeBron James with your team at 17. I might. But with most of you wouldn't trust just any 17-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and so all of these have their advantages, have their drawbacks, and I always come back to, if you have a bad general manager, they're a bad general manager. And it doesn't matter what the system is. They're going to screw up tanking. They're going to be the team that gets relegated to a lower league and costs you money in the pro rel situation. And if you eliminate the draft, they're the guys that are still going to be throwing money at Michael Kidd-Gilchrist when Bradley Beal is.
They're still going to make bad decisions.
They're still going to make bad decisions. And so that part of it still won't fix the problem of every team being the most competitive that they could. Their last option is to challenge it legally.
Take the teams to court. So basically, this law review says that because the NBA is a partnership, they're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
The market sharing and stuff, that a team who is tanking could basically face legal action in court over the revenue sharing losses by the other teams.
Right, because as we mentioned in the previous episode, there is less attendance. That revenue sharing is lower. Perhaps the TV contract is lower. You're not pulling your fair share as a franchise in a league because the leagues are the franchises. It's not like kind of European sports where the leagues just exist as sanctioning bodies and the individual organizations play in them. The 30 NBA teams are the NBA. That's what the NBA is those 30 owners putting things together. So if you're not doing your share, you absolutely, in the way that their agreements and bylaws are set up, you're absolutely in danger of being sued, which is an option. And maybe that's the most American option because we sue everybody for everything.
Just take them to court.
Is to be litigious in this situation. That's certainly a solution. And I would think that the NBA owners would be the most likely to pursue such action.
Yeah.
Because they are the most renegade and the youngest, and those types of owners exist in the NBA where they don't in other sports. So, where do you fall on tanking? You like it? You hate it? You think it works? It's fine?
I hate that it happens because it puts, like as a fan, it puts a fan in a tough spot to be a fan. I'm not an outrageous professional sport. I watch sports. I watch professional sports, but I don't have a single professional sports team that I am a diehard fan of. So to me, it doesn't, like, I can't imagine being a Washington football team fan and just being emotionally tied to that team and them just constantly screwing it up.
Mm.
I just can't imagine, like, college is different. My Carolina basketball team goes unsaid. But I mean, professional sports is such a different game that I'm not emotionally tied to it. So, but as a general sports fan, I don't like tanking because when you watch the games, you can tell that they're doing it.
Yeah,
you can tell that they're tanking. But I also understand the need to rebuild a squad. Like, if you're just terrible, what other option do you have? Now, competition-wise, you should go out and try to win every game.
Yeah,
that's just sport. That's just competition. But it obviously works.
Yeah, somewhere, somehow, things are happening. And I think that's where I am as a fan of some of these teams that, the Hornets in particular, they're on Reddit, their fans are outrageous in wanting to blow the team up and start over. And it just, you can't use past failures as a reason not to do something, but you, as a whole, looking at examples after examples, you're just as likely to find somebody that's not good as you are that's good. And just didn't worth it to me. It just didn't worth it to me.
Tanking is not worth it.
If you're going to end up being the 8th seed or the 7th seed or the 6th seed, make one playoff appearance, you can do that by getting lightning in a bottle and getting the right set of guys and coaches.
But you would rather do that than risk being horrible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If the end result's going to be the same anyway, just be mediocre and
do it the right way.
Torture everybody. That's fine. But don't
do it on purpose.
Yeah.
There's people's livelihoods are at stake for this.
Yeah.
So you as a coach, you could ruin a player's career.
Yeah.
By putting them on terrible teams.
Yeah, and not being able to develop around, not having people on their team that are good examples to look up to and learn things from player to player.
That could be what happened with some of the high lottery picks who didn't work out.
Sure.
I mean, of course, you go to a bad team, you just don't get developed the same way.
Yep. All right.
That was good.
That's our episode on tanking. Feel free to let us know on social media how you feel about tanking, if it works, if it doesn't, if it is something worth pursuing for teams that are in need of help. Let us know on social media if you'd like us to talk about something. Send us some information. Glad to hear from you.
We like interaction.
And be on the lookout for our next episode that'll drop in a couple of weeks. Thanks for listening. We're out.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only please, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.
They actually took Giannis's younger brother
Mm-hmm.
in 2018 with the very last pick.
Antetokounmpo.
Kostas Antetokounmpo.
Antetokounmpo. So fun.
It was a fun name.
Antetokounmpo.
They also took J.P. Tokoto from UNC with the 58th pick in 2015.
Antetokounmpo Tokoto.